Now everybody on the planet has anti-phishing technology, so we protected a lot of people just by those handful of conversations.
Welcome to the Keep Austin Secure podcast, where we interview leaders, founders, and innovators in the cybersecurity world. We sit down with those guys to discuss the forever changing, fast moving cybersecurity world, specifically those that are building here in the fastest growing hub in the US, which is Austin, Texas. Today, I've got a very special guest, Robert Hansen, also known as Arsnake. Funny enough, when I first started talking to people about the podcast, everybody was saying your name. So you have to get Robert on and get Arsnake on. So yeah, really glad to have you on, Robert.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is this comedy or drama?
No, it's all good stories. It was good stories. I heard really good things about it. So yeah, we had Roger Thornton on a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's great.
So by the time this goes live, he would have gone live, and he said after a few times we should get Arsnake on. So
okay, great.
Just for the listeners, it'd be great just to hear a bit about you, a bit about your backstory.
Sure. So I have been in computer security for 30 years now. Right, 30, yeah. Which is kind of weird to say. I've been doing this longer than I've been doing anything else. And I primarily came up doing sort of the red team side on the offensive side, trying to find vulnerabilities in web applications, browsers. And gradually I moved more into the network and host security side. I did a little bit of blue teaming, like I was a senior global product manager at trust and safety at eBay, for instance. So I protected eBay and a handful of other things. I started consultancy, and subprime mortgage crisis crashed, and I ended up moving on to from that consultancy into being the VP of labs over White Hat. Later started my own company called Outside Intel, which got sort of baked and turned into what we now think of as Bit Discovery, which got sold to Tenable. And then most recently, Jeremiah Grossman and I started, and a couple of other founders started a fund called Grossman Ventures. And it was a little bit smaller fund than we were expecting to start. And just a really, really bad time in the market in general to raise cash, especially for first-time fund managers. Everyone wants to see a track record. So we're like, okay, well, let's do the fund, but it'll be a smaller fund, but at the same time, we'll start a new company on the side. So we talked to all of our LPs, like, are you okay with this? Nothing up our sleeves. In fact, we'll actually make it benefit to you if that company succeeds. And everyone said, yeah, go for it. That's kind of what they're in for, is the ride, right? That's the whole point of investing. So we talked to Roger, who ended up becoming lead on that deal. And so we've now closed a $12.5 million seed round for that new company, which is in the vulnerability management space, called Root Evidence, or just Evidence for short. And I think that's short of it. I also wrote a book on AI fairly recently, and I've been really heavily focused on sort of the alignment problem and hallucinations in particular, but I do a lot of other work in that space as well, sort of on the side, just kind of just because I think it's really important and interesting. I also have a newsletter and a bunch of other stuff, so I keep myself busy.
Yeah, I noticed that in prep for today, because my previous career was network engineering recruitment, and I saw that you were in that industry. What kind of triggered you to go cyber networking and back into the cyber world?
Well, so I have always been a web application security guy from the beginning. From day one, hour one, first thing I ever really started doing was breaking browsers. I really thought it was super interesting, and web apps, and understanding web apps aren't what they are now. They're very, very simple chat board type stuff. There might be an authentication system of some kind. They're all really rudimentary. So everything was extremely vulnerable back then. It still is to a large degree, but nothing like it was back then, like really Wild West. And so that's where I got my chops, except for at that time, really everyone was mostly interested in network security. They're trying to break into applications over the network using, various different exploits against whatever services were running. So it was not cool to be doing what I was doing. No one, it got zero respect whatsoever. In fact, it didn't even have a name. Eventually, it was called CGI security, and then later on, it turned into something called web application security. But it didn't, when I started, there was no name for it. In fact, there was only a few other people in the world doing it when I was doing it. It was me, Luda Yu, Umbrella.name, and Michael Zalewski. And those first two, Luda Yu and Umbrella.name, we don't know what happened to them. I think they probably went to the Chinese military or something. I don't know. And Michael Zalewski is retired now. So literally, I've been doing this longer than anyone on Earth has been doing it, which is kind of interesting. But later on, I started realizing there was something missing in my knowledge. And my former business partner, James Flom, who I wrote a lot about in my book, he was an insanely awesome network security guy. So he was teaching me kind of, I don't know, kind of through osmosis almost. Like I'd say something, he's like, "What are you talking about? That's not how the internet works." And he'd get up on his whiteboard and he'd draw it out for me. I'm like, "Oh, I just thought, DNS that worked this way." He's like, "No, don't be an idiot." He was really terse. So, so he'd walk me through how things worked. And I got really pretty decent at it just by being near him. And then later on, I realized there was even more that was missing from my knowledge. And I started like really digging into that because I felt like there was something you could do with it. And that's how we came up with like DNS rebinding attacks and a bunch of other stuff. Basically because of him and his tutoring me as I was going, because I was really trying to attack web apps, but there's a bunch of cool network things you could do to attack the web apps. So that's kind of how we got there. RC19 cache poisoning came from a confluence of that research and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay. Wow. So being one of 5 people in the world, there was 4 people in the world, how would you keep on top of or learn the technologies? I know we were speaking before, you're a big researcher, but how would you approach it?
Well, back then there was nothing to read.
Yeah.
There was no document because no one was doing it. So we eventually, over the next, call it 5 years, there became something called the Web Application Security Mailing List. There was the original one and the one that exists now, but there was an original one, and it was really interesting watching people talk. And then one guy, Rainforest Puppy, came on the scene, and he wrote something in Frac 55, which is an amazing article he wrote on doing null byte injection, and he had another one, I think, on SQL injection, if memory serves. And they're just like very well researched papers for the time. Amazing, like truly, truly amazing. Nowadays, you'd be like, okay, that's a cool new class of vulnerability or whatever. But back then, it was really cutting edge. And it really kind of that and a handful of other papers sort of got me going, okay, you have to understand programming languages, you have to understand how the browser really works, not how they claim it works, because those things are very different. And browsers are different, so it's not just because one browser is doing one thing one way, it doesn't mean the other browser is. And in fact, later on when I was at eBay, my boss has a kind of a weird way of just sort of tossing me the keys or whatever. So he's like, okay, just go we want to put anti-phishing technology into the browser. And I'm like, okay. He's like, he kind of more or less tosses me the keys. Like, go call Microsoft. I'm like, what do you mean call Microsoft? What does that mean? Like, when I hand Microsoft, like, what do you mean? He's like, well, just figure something out. Call them. I'm like, I don't understand how, like, who am I going to call? And what am I going to say? Hi, I'm eBay. Please start doing what I'm telling you to do. Like, what? I don't understand how this conversation is supposed to go. He's like, just figure it out. So I do a bunch of research. I find somebody, and it turns out they're thrilled to talk to eBay. And they're like, yes, let's figure out how we can work together. And so I'm like, okay, here's what we want. I want anti-phishing technology built in the browser. And they're like, okay, and let me think about it. And so I went and talked to the Mozilla guys, who were tiny back then. There was like 50 people. It was a tiny little office. It smelled like feet. And I explained to them what I wanted to do. And they said, that sounds like a really great idea. Why don't you write a plugin for it? I'm like, no. It can't be some optional thing that people have. It's got to be baked into the browser. And they're like, no. Meanwhile, Microsoft's like, this sounds awesome. We're totally going to do it. And so they bought a company who had the technology, so they didn't have to build it themselves, brought it in. And all of a sudden, like, their Mozilla's major competitor, was doing it. And so Google was coming on the scene, and they're like, well, we better have the minimum technology that Microsoft has. So they ended up building it, kind of backporting it into Mozilla. And so now everybody on the planet has anti-phishing technology because of these conversations. So we protected a lot of people just by those handful of conversations. And
that is crazy.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff that happened in the day that because there was no one doing the work, right?
Yeah.
They needed some adults in the room, and I wouldn't exactly call myself the adult in the room at the time, but I was certainly cutting edge in the way I was thinking about things. And eventually, out of those same conversations came something called content security policy, which basically allows you to protect. Like Netscape came to me and they're like, "Hey, we're so super impressed. We have this like cool new thing we're doing. Like, if we detect that you're on a bad site, we'll flip you into the highest security mode that Mozilla has to offer. If it's a site we don't know about, you'll be medium level Mozilla. If it's a site we trust, we'll put you in the IE rendering engine." I'm like, that is the worst idea I have ever heard. Like, you just managed to make it possible for me to find any exploit I want. And all I have to do is find a cross-site scripting exploit in any site I want, and then force you to go to that site, and boom, I win. And they're looking at me like, oh my God, we just wasted years of research to get this done. And like, you just destroyed it in like 10 seconds. I'm like, yeah, I want the exact opposite of that. Like, if I'm eBay and you trust me, tell me to tell you to not trust me. Like, allow me to turn on maximum security settings. And they're just like, they couldn't grok what I was saying at all. So then I went back to Mozilla and I'm like, okay, here's another idea. I would really like you to build this thing. We didn't have a name for it, turned into a content security policy. And they went back and forth and back and forth. But multiple years later, they finally agreed and they actually built it. And now it's in every single browser, in your mobile phone, your laptop there, every single web-enabled thing has this thing turned on now. So
that's insane.
So we literally protected 1 billion people because of these handful of conversations.
So I know you and Jeremiah have like a framework or a mental model you follow, but just personally, you've been doing this for 30 years, like you said. I guess 2 questions. One would be, how do you see that there is a problem before everybody else knows there's a problem? And how do you then get everybody to agree with you that that is a problem?
We struggle with this actual question all the time internally. And I'm not trying to sound pompous here, but I honestly believe we're probably at least 4 or 5 years ahead of the bulk of the industry, and probably more like 8 to 10 years ahead of where the standard of the industry is, which is a long way ahead. Like, you don't really want to be that far ahead. You want to be where the market is like going to. You want to skate to where the puck is going. You don't want to be there like a week before the game. You know what I mean? And so this is a problem because we have a lot of theories and we believe them to be true. In fact, we even and sometimes have extremely good evidence that they're true. I prefer to work with evidence, hence the name of the company, as a matter of fact. And it turns out that it's even with the evidence, there's so much baked in incorrect knowledge in our industry that it's going to take a lot, and misincentives and a bunch of other things that are making it difficult to have conversations in public, that we believe we have a kind of a timeline before we're ready to go live with a product. It's like, like 11 months from now, I think, is when our schedule is. We might come out earlier, but we're kind of giving ourselves a little grace there. But we honestly believe we have 11 months to get people to the bare minimum of where we were when we started this whole conversation years ago. And so, we've just now started, and it turns out memes are kind of useful.
Yeah.
I know it's not
I've noticed.
Yeah. You started seeing me post a lot more memes. And there's a reason for it, because we feel like people are going to more readily nod their head without necessarily understanding the deep meaning behind why we chose those memes, or specifically how they're gently trying to shape them to understand a bigger thing that we're trying to get them to understand. And eventually we'll start linking these things together, so it's a little bit more clear why we're saying all these seemingly disparate, in some cases, or whatever concepts. And not everything is related. I want to be clear about that. Sometimes I'm posting about ChatGPT or something that's sort of outside the realm of it. But when we're talking about vulnerability management and where things are going with compliance, and when we're talking about CVSS and EPSS and a bunch of these things, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about those things. But what we found, and I don't want to spoil this too much, but what we found is when we actually did the analysis and we looked at everybody who publishes any stats anywhere, openly anyway, just that we can go scrape. One thing stood out right away, and it was actually kind of terrifying. None of the data agreed. And, So one thing is true: either they're all wrong, or all but one is wrong. And which of the two is more correct? And one of them could be closer to right, or there could be like edging towards correctness, or getting more correct, or getting less correct, or whatever. So there's variance in there. I don't want to be as black and white, but the fact that none of them agreed gave us like massive alarm bells on our side. We're like, wow, that means this entire industry has been baked on a series of very poor assumptions. And when we started getting more data, we realized where some of those false assumptions are coming from, who's pushing them, and in some cases they may not truly be aware at all what they're doing. In other cases, they're totally aware and they're doing it anyway. And knowing which is which is going to be tricky to determine. And actually, I don't want to name and shame personally. I just don't find value in that. But I do think it's really critical that we as an industry move on to the next phase, where it's like, okay, let's start using real evidence to make our decisions, instead of just like, I feel bad when I have a vulnerability out there. Like, I know that makes you scared, but we have things for like insurance now. Like, we didn't have it when I got started. That's not a thing, but now we have that. So we should be having more conversations about what the business really needs, and not what our feelings are telling us when we look at a severity, whatever even that means. I struggle with this a lot, trying to explain it to people. Like, what is stoplight information security? It's like high, medium, and low. Well, what's medium? What does that mean? Like point me to the actual definition of medium. And if you can, I bet it reads something like it's not critical, or something dumb, right? Or, it doesn't meet some framework of being remotely exploitable or something. Okay, fair. And that I can actually get on board with some of those like nuances, but that's a variable. That's not a score. A variable of binary, it is or isn't exploitable remotely, right? My simple answer to them back is, okay, let's say I have like 10 mediums. How many highs is that worth? Like, if I were to trade and I say, okay, I want to fix a bunch of mediums, but I don't want to fix any of the highs because they're business critical things I don't want to get in front of. How many mediums is one high worth? And when no one can answer that question to me, I know that they're not really talking about math. They're talking about feelings they have about vulnerabilities. And I'm okay with that because we haven't had anything better up to this point. I now think it's time. It's time to get rid of all of that old stoplight information security. That is the past. It is time to grow up as an industry. Like, I'm not getting any younger. When we sit and we talk to people on boards, and they're asking us very simple questions like, if I give you $50,000 to go fix something, how much risk am I retiring? And we can't answer that question. That is a serious indictment on where we have spent our time and money as an industry.
And how, with like the eBay and now with Root Evidence, how did you even realize this was a problem? Because you got the data to back it up and use memes to spread the problem.
Well, in the case of eBay, it was quite simple. We have a certain amount of fraud going through the system.
Oh.
That fraud costs us X amount of dollars. We would like to retire some amount of that risk. And I was able to watch before, during, and after a lot of these security tools roll out. And what I noticed back then is that they were terrible. Most of the security that we employed was awful. Like, one example was we were worried about phishing. So we put out this anti-phishing website, like, here's how to detect phishing, and here's blah, 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 blah. What do you think happened after? It cost us $1 million to create that website. What do you think happened after we launched it?
You got phished. Well, not phished.
Well,
yes,
yes, the company had been phished for sure. No, but from a stats perspective, how much do you think phishing went? Up, down, stayed the same? What do you think?
I'd assume it went down.
It went up.
Oh.
Phishing actually increased. It did not go down. Successful phishing. And the reason for that is the bad guys read that same thing, and they informed themselves on all the tips and tricks that we were telling people to look for. So they made their phishing kits better. And their phishing actually volume went up. Successful phishing attempts that led to actual compromise of accounts went up.
You've basically flagged to the bad guys what you're looking for, so then they go do everything outside of that. Yeah.
Right. While other things we did seem good from the outside, but in practice were horrible, like second factor authentication. Now, if I'm going to force you as an employee to use second factor authentication to log into a company, no big deal. You're going to want to do that because you want to get a paycheck. But as an eBay user, if I put that in front of you, you're going to go, boy, this is really annoying. I don't really want to log into eBay anymore. Or like, I'll do it maybe 5 or 6 times as a novelty, but now like it's my kid clicked the button one too many times, or I lost the key fob or whatever. Forget it. I'm not going to do it. Right. And so what we ended up using it for eventually was punishment. If you've been phished too many times, if you had too many account compromises, we'd give this to you so you would stop using the platform.
It's like a disciplinary almost.
Yep. And so that's not what most people think of when they think of security. They think of security as like this pro-business, whatever. And oftentimes it totally backfires because we didn't have the evidence for what we were actually doing. We're just kind of blindly trying things. This is early days, right? So we didn't really know what we were doing. But it's pretty easy to know that you should go down that path because phishing was a real problem. And to your point, yes, we were absolutely phished. In fact, I was the one who figured out we were phished. One of the ATO groups sent me an email because I was in charge of authentication. And they're like, hey, their authentication's broken. And I'm like, what? And I'm looking at this phishing email that they sent me. I'm like, I don't understand what this phishing email has to do with authentication. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh my God, is that a phishing email? I'm like, you didn't put your information into this thing. Like every one of the ATO guys put their information in. And so, yeah, they phished every single one of effectively our super users that can log into any account and do anything they want. So yes, everyone changed their password that day.
That's insane. The people you'd hope would be the most secure.
Right.
It's,
it's an easy mistake to make, even if you're pretty trained.
Especially back then, I imagine.
Especially back then.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot better controls in place, but still, like I don't blame anyone for getting phished. I really don't. It's actually pretty easy to have happen.
Yeah, that's crazy. So just going on to the business now and the memes, that ties into my next question. Actually, before we go into that, one thing I'd love to know is where does R-Snake come from?
Oh, it's an old like RPG handle back when RPGs were things you open, like books that you opened, and like played on desktops and stuff. And I was called The Snake, and then I was going to college, and they said, you have to have a computer security handle, and we prefer if you use your name, like R. Hansen or something. And I'm like, but you don't know what my middle name is. It could be Snake. Like, I wonder what would happen if I did it anyway. Like, what is the punishment? Are they going to make me change my account? I'm like, okay, I'm just going to pick it because they have no idea what my middle name is. So I put R Snake in there, and no one ever complained, not even once. So.
Oh, right, okay. It's funny, Elliot, who I work with, he is from the northern part of the UK. So he says, it sounds like he's saying our snake.
Yeah.
So I thought he was referring to just as snake one time. I was like, who's our snake? We don't have a snake. He meant our snake. So
I get that a lot, and arsenic as well. So yeah, I used to have an email address that was arsenic when people would typo it. I'm like, whatever. You'll get there anyway.
I used to, my Xbox gamer tag was Deanie. So Dean with a Y, because Dino was already taken. And the American guys I used to play Call of Duty would call me Deannie. So my friends still now back home, 24 years on, call me Deannie. So it sticks for sure.
It sure does. At least I picked something kind of cool. Like, can you imagine it had been horrible, like, and stuck with it for 30 years?
Yeah. Well, Arsenake's cool. You're known as Arsnake. That's a cool nickname.
Yeah.
And we were speaking about this earlier today. You hit 10,000 LinkedIn followers.
Yeah.
I saw that.
I did very little to make that happen, but I was sort of like, wow, it's kind of an interesting milestone. It's interesting that it's happening now, same year as I'm hitting my 30 years in the information security, which I think is a much bigger accomplishment, to be honest, but still, I don't know. I felt like it was a kind of a moment to slow down a second and kind of pause, I guess.
I noticed on Twitter or X, you had like 35,000 followers on there as well.
Well, I've also been on there longer. And there I really did try to push to try to get more followers because there was a time in my life where I really thought stats mattered. I had a really interesting conversation with Daniel Miessler, who you should totally have on your podcast, by the way. Awesome guy. He's like, the truth is he doesn't look at stats at all anymore. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like at all. He's like, yeah. And he's like, kind of accidentally I'll see them sometimes, like, because I'm doing something else, but like I try not to focus on it at all. And so ever since then, I've actually, like I have a newsletter, for instance, I never look at the thing intentionally, but as the framework is loading, it'll force me to look at my stats. I'm like, ugh, try not to. I actually try to not look and just move on. You know what I mean? And so with the 10,000, it was actually my wife. She's like, "You're about to hit 10,000." I'm like, "What? Am I? I had no idea." And she's like, "You're getting a bunch per day." I'm like watching it like creep up. It's because of these memes. Actually, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. I think it's time to take a little pause and just recognize that it's gotten there. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the industry, not many people in the industry build a personal brand or attempt to build a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you've got the big LinkedIn following, Twitter following, you've wrote several publications, books. What's been like the inspiration, I guess, throughout your career to contribute, to build a personal brand, to focus on those kind of things where you're probably busy in your day job anyway?
My answer when I was younger would be horrible. My answer now is a much better answer. So I'll start with my good answer now. Well, I will, because I think it's important for up and coming people to understand I wasn't always the person I am today. The reason I do it now is because I think the industry lacks inspiration. I think it lacks direction. I think it lacks visionary thinking, forward thinking. I don't think that there is a true voice of information security. I know you're kind of close to this, but like when you think of like the voice of finance, you might be thinking Warren Buffett or something. You know what I mean? We don't really have that from information security. And I think that's actually a bad thing. I think it's time to have that. I think it really should be Jeremiah. I think not me specifically. But like any general, you need, some, captains and colonels running around. And a lot of the thinking that he does, like, love Jeremiah to death, but he makes a lot of bad assumptions sometimes. And instead of just throwing them out there to the world, which I'm glad, he stops and asks a bunch of questions of me and other people. I am one of the people he calls first, and he say, "Okay, Robert, I got this crazy idea. What do you think about blah, blah, blah?" And I'll tell him you're right. That is crazy. That's a terrible idea because of these reasons. And then that's where it stops. Or I'll say, that's wrong, but actually there's some interesting thinking in there because you could do this and that and this. Or every once in a while, he's got a home run and it's just amazing. And I'm like, that's a really clever idea. And so we can battle it back and forth. So I think he's the true visionary. Truly, I think he is it. But he needs somebody with a ton of experience to war game with him and threat model it and make sure it actually will hold up to the sort of the court of popular opinion. Unfortunately, does matter in information security, but also the technical side, because sometimes he's just not sort of blind to some new technology that's coming around the corner, or like I'm involved in a lot of chats that he isn't, where I'm seeing people complaining about certain technologies and not working right or whatever. Anyway, that's now. Once upon a time, though, it was because I think I somehow felt a need to be heard and be seen. I felt like popularity mattered. I think it's because I was an only kid and I was compensating something. I don't know. But it was bad. It was absolutely, it was corrosive to my soul, to who I am. And it made me make a lot of bad decisions in my life that I'm not super proud of. And in hindsight, I'm glad I went through that. Because it gives me like an absolute true south, head away from there, like I do not want to go that direction. So if I find myself trying to promote myself, as a like come like, do stuff with me or something, I'm like, okay, I don't want that. What I am trying to help this company grow for sure, because I think it's solving some really, really important problems. In fact, I think we can change the industry, which is amazing. That's back to my roots. That's why I originally got started in security in the first place. It's this passion and interest for what we're doing. There was no money to be made when I got started. There was no popularity contest. There was nobody to impress. There was no social media.
It wasn't even an industry.
No, it wasn't even an industry, right? So I got into it for clearly different reasons.
Yeah.
It was only later that I started like wanting the court of opinion to matter and in my favor, in my direction. So
I guess that comes with the success as well, right? Like as that starts to happen, you probably change and maneuver into a different person as you grow. But
I think so. Yeah.
What was the, if you don't mind me asking, what was the turning point where you're like, stopped caring about the fame and the popularity?
As soon as Sec Theory exploded, which is my consultancy practice, I realized a couple things about myself all at once. Probably the most important is I was not a very nice person. When I was interacting with people, it was always to get something out of the conversation. It was always to extract, never to provide, information to them or whatever. If I was doing that, it was to get a contract or to get a book deal or something, whatever it was, right? And when the company collapsed, first of all, I let a lot of people down in the process, which is horrible. People who had livelihoods attached to what I was doing, which is bad. And I actually ended up going to the mirror and literally firing myself. Like, it's kind of a little dramatic, but I really needed to, not laid off. This wasn't like bad economics, which it was, by the way. The subprime mortgage crisis exploded. But I, as a CEO, led us into a company that can't survive that. So as the chief executive, I literally went, you are fired. And it was a massive amount of depression, and there was a whole bunch of people who were kind of coming out of the woodwork to try to talk to me. And I realized I didn't really perceive any of those people as friends. They were business contacts, maybe. They were like, people I felt like I could, get into a party if I asked them to or whatever, but not friends. And so I didn't feel that they could comfort me in that time. And I really did need comforting, actually. I was pretty frail. And in hindsight, I'm like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to have this transactional relationship with people. It felt horrible about the whole situation, including my business partner, James. I felt like I had a very transactional relationship with him, even though he was my best friend, which is a very strange thing, actually. But that just shows like the depths that I was in this transactional thinking. And so coming out of that subprime mortgage crisis and losing my company and realizing I didn't really have anybody I considered a friend, it's like a true friend, I'm like, wow, I just have absolutely not done the right thing for myself. I've just led myself astray. And so I started listening to some podcasts, and actually kind of not even related to what I was thinking. There was a bunch of like pickup podcast stuff going around back then. And like, there was some people like trying to like go after all these women on Rainy Street or whatever. There was like I forget, there was a TV show in Austin or whatever. And so I was actually listening to it as an adversarial analysis of them. But for whatever reason, one of the ones I picked up was like, actually just like be nice to people. If you're nice to people, like people gravitate to you. I'm like, but that's just sound advice. That's not picking up people. That's just a good way to be. Yeah. And then I started doing a little bit more research, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of was I was focusing too much on the one half of that thing, which is all like the negging and all that stuff. Like those people are real creeps or whatever. But then there's this other half. It's just like, if you're a nice person and you have like your own values and you actually do things you care about, and people will notice and they'll like you and they'll gravitate towards you. I'm like, if you smile more, if you like, care about what they have to say, things change.
Yeah.
And so I just, as an experiment, one day I started doing that and started asking people questions and like getting to know
nice
them.
To people.
Yeah, just super nice to everybody. I don't care what, even if I'll never see this person again, cab driver, whatever, waitress or something, like super nice, ask them about their lives and whatever. I learned a lot about people in the process. I learned about myself, became a much nicer person, started making tons of real friends that I still have to this day, kind of almost to my own detriment, just because I now have so many people inviting me to things like, come on, fly to this different state and go to this concert with me. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Like, as much as we're friends, I've got too many things going on.
It's good problems to have.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I actually, I hope my fiance doesn't listen to this. In my late teens, I read Neil Strauss's book, the PUA stuff, but I wasn't that adversary. I was reading it because I thought it'd help me in my dating game. And then I didn't like the idea of any of the stuff in the book, so I put it down. And in my like mid-20s, I come across a book by Mark Manson. It's called, I think it's Dating Models or Models. But the whole concept of the book is just being unapologetically yourself. So like the example he gives, he meets a woman on a night out, and he's got, I think he speaks Russian, or he has an interest in Russian culture, and he just talks to her about that. She takes a lot of interest in that, thought he was cool because he was being his like nerdy self as such, and then it's now his wife. But the book is almost the opposite of that PUA culture, but it literally supports what you said. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's really something to just actually genuinely being a nice person. Who knew?
Go figure.
So that's my current status. Just try to be nice to everybody.
Nice. And just going over to like root evidence, going back to that, I know we covered quite a bit there. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about there which we haven't covered?
Well, we're a little bit tight with the specifics of what the company will end up being, but mostly because I don't want to confuse people with the end of the research. I want them to experience the research kind of the way I experienced it, and not exactly in the same time scale and not in the same way. They're not going to be downloading all this data and processing it themselves and stuff. Like, we have so much data. And it's just, there's no way anyone's going to do this work. In fact, that was one of Jeremiah's first arguments. He's like, one of the reasons no one's ever going to build a competitor to this company, at least not until we're done, is because no one's bothered to look at all this data. Like, no one's really, they've done maybe bits and pieces of it, or, they analyzed one of the data sets really thoroughly, but they've never really done all of this analysis. And we put it all together, and a whole bunch that we haven't published as well. And, I think it would be better for the audience to be brought along bit by bit and shown the thinking that brought us to the conclusions we are at, rather than just showing them the conclusion. Because I think a lot of people will agree with us and they'll just nod because it's us and they like us and they want to, just. It's kind of a problem, actually. I don't really want people to agree with me. I want them to agree with the facts.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's unreasonable. I think what I want them to do is say, Robert, this is terrifying, and this is correctly wrong. Like, this is incorrect. We got to fix this. I'm like, I know. So we have some ideas. We could fix it this way, and they're like, oh, well, I like this because of this. I'm like, right. And here's all the data to back up that decision making. I'm like, okay, now I'm seeing where we're going, and you can easier lead the horse to water if they're looking at the same data the same way that you're looking at it.
And I imagine it's almost like, do you know the red car theory?
It's once you've seen one, you always...
Yeah. So if you now, when we leave today, this morning, you probably haven't seen a red car.
No.
We'll probably leave here in the car park, or parking lot, as you'd call it.
That's right.
We'd see loads of red cars.
Probably.
So I imagine a lot of the things you're putting out into the ecosystem as such, people are now going to start looking for those problems, seeing those problems, then they'll have anecdotal evidence to anchor to that problem.
And they're going to communicate with each other behind the scenes.
Yeah.
They're going to have conversations about what we're talking about, not in public. I think a lot of people are going to feel nervous, maybe, to have these conversations out in public. Because it's like you're upending 20, 30 years of really wonderfully well thought out. A good example. I'm on a thread today, as a matter of fact. Some guy was talking about this very early precursor to Nessus. That was before Ron Gula and all those guys got involved. And he's like, I made the terrible decision to make a 5-star rating about how bad the vulnerability was when you found it. And he's like, what I didn't realize was going to happen is that a whole bunch of idiots were going to take that and say, we're only going to fix 4s and 5s. He's like, that was not the point of that. That's not why I put that there. But now, like, it just kind of kept going on and on and on. It's been this thing. And I'm like, and this is the stoplight information security. You could say it's high, medium, low. You could say 1 through 5. You could say A, B, C, D. It's always the same problem over and over. You can't do math on these non-math things. I mean, you can, and people try, which is even worse. But it's not. You're not really doing math. So, as far as root evidence goes, look, I think the fundamental is we have to have real data as an industry. And one of the things that we've been lacking as an industry forever is actionable data about what the adversaries are actually doing. What we have is indicators of compromise. That's about as close as a thing as we've had up to this point. The problem with that is, like, I used to run this website called hackers.org, and we had this one thread. It was called So It Begins. On the full disclosure subdirectory is called So It Begins. And in there, I just started posting cross-site scripting exploits, just one after another on, Sears.com, on Google.com, or whatever, just tons of them, right? We got that thing up to about 1,000 posts. So approximately about 1,000 companies were compromised by cross-site scripting exploits. Now, you're going to look at that and go, wow, a group of hundreds of skilled hackers are actively finding and exploiting exploits on public websites on a public forum where anyone can go look at that. The losses must be off the charts. There were no losses.
Really?
No, there's never a loss.
Because of the just low level.
Because it's the wrong kind of exploit. It's the wrong, and the people finding it were trying to find it to help companies. They're trying to increase the awareness about how common these vulnerabilities were. We were researchers, and just because you have an indicator doesn't really mean anything. What you need is loss data. And that's what I'm saying. There's all these lies we've been told about the data. And it's like indicators are compromised. This is, we have evidence that people are compromising these things. No, you don't. What you have is a log of somebody testing something. Does that same company have a bug bounty program? Well, you might be encountering thousands and thousands of adversaries trying all kinds of exploits, trying to find anything that might get them a payout. Where's the loss? Are you counting the loss as the bug bounty payout? Okay, maybe you could count that as a loss, but you chose to have that loss. You could also not have a bug bounty program, and then everyone would have left you alone because no one cares. Is that indicators are compromised? Both yes and no. And so it's like there's a lot of misnomers in the way that we're cataloging this data and talking about this data. And unfortunately, I am absolutely very early first people to blame on a lot of these poor assumptions, by the way. Like, I'm not absolving myself of this because, we didn't know better. When we're starting this industry, we had no idea. But we're adults now, and we need to actually analyze what we're analyzing. Like, we have data. What does this data mean? Where did it come from? How do we prove that it's real data? And I don't see enough people asking these really intrinsic questions. It's like when you're a fourth grader, second grader or something, you start to ask why a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why are we doing it that way? Well, because this is what we have access to. And like, what else do we have access to? Because clearly this isn't the only data source we could get. So, well, that other data is hard to get, or, we just don't have it yet because no one's built a product around collecting that data. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, shouldn't we go try to tackle that problem of getting better telemetry, tying it to real business risk? And I don't mean like the risks that we've been talking about risk. Like the risk of a high being compromised is not the same as $2.5 million of risk. That is a totally different thing. Like, what I don't like is you'll go into a CFO's office, who's the real risk officer of the company, and you'll say, give me $50,000 because I want to retire 3 cross-site scripting, 2 cross-site request forgeries, a command injection, a SQL injection, and I want to change all that so I can change my grade from a B- to a B+. And they're like, what are you talking about? They have no idea how to process what you just said. First of all, there's a lot of industry gobbledygook. Secondly, why do you care about a grade? Third, why is this anything the CFO cares about?
Yeah.
So
who are you?
So you've wasted a ton of their time. They don't trust you as an industry anymore, and you're not actually reducing the risk of the company, quite potentially, because you don't know where the real risk is. You actually have no idea what the real risk is. You're just fixing a bunch of random stuff. On the other hand, you could have a conversation like, I want $50,000 so I can retire $9.4 million of risk. And they're like, okay, show me your math. And okay, here's my math. And you show them the math, and they're like, well, okay, you're saying our fully loaded head count to go fix this is $100 an hour. It's actually $120 an hour. Okay, well, now I'm talking math to a math person. That is a much different conversation, and it's a much more adult conversation. And now you get invited to the room, because another thing our industry doesn't understand is they keep talking about security as a cost center. It's not. I mean, it's only a cost center because they have no idea what they're doing, because they're not talking to CFOs. What we're actually doing is removing unrealized loss from the company. And if you're talking about the valuation of a company, let's say it's a pre-public company or hasn't been purchased yet and is eventually going to get acquired or has aims to get acquired, as a multiple attached to it. So it's like a 10 times valuation, let's say on average. Maybe it's a consultancy, it's 1.5 times, but whatever. You can kind of figure out what your multiple is. So if I retire $9.4 million of risk, I've actually retired $94 million of value that you would have otherwise lost.
Yeah.
That is a significant improvement for $50,000. Now, $50,000 also comes off that list. You have to also multiply that times 10. So $500,000 to make $94 million. I'm okay with that.
The CFO is going to listen.
They're going to be they're going to be listening to that conversation, but
Yeah.
they're not going to listen to that first conversation. Like, get the hell out of my office.
Yeah.
And so we haven't done what we need to do as an industry. And this is going to be one of those hard lessons that our industry's not going to like. They like their dashboards. They like their red, yellow, green stuff. And I'm not saying you can't color code things. I'm saying it's going to have math behind it, real math.
Yeah.
Anytime you find something boundary constrained 0 to a number is when you know they don't know what they're talking about. Because how did you choose 10? And why is 10 exactly 10 times better than 1 or worse than 1? Why? Because if you go in there, you're like, oh, the world ending F is a 10. Okay, so you're saying that's $1 billion of risk, right? Let's say your company's worth $1 billion. That's $1 billion of risk. It'll end their company. That's a 10, right? So you're saying that I could retire 10 ones and have the exact same effect.
Yeah. So 1 is zero sum, 1 isn't.
It's just not possible to do this math because it's not math. I mean, you could try, and people do try, but it's just not the right way to do it. And there hasn't been enough clear-headed thinking on this topic. So what we want to do, the net effect of it, is we want to have a new way of doing vulnerability management completely from the ground up, rethinking this whole thing. Why are we doing what we are doing? Like, can we just do what we need to do and not what we're told from 20, 30 years ago by, frankly, guys like me, probably was me, telling people, you got to fix that vulnerability because anyone could attack it. Or, yeah, but they're not going to.
Yeah.
Is the problem. They never, ever will. 1 million years can pass and that vulnerability will never get compromised. And let's say we are 1 million years in the future and we look at that vulnerability and where it's still sitting there and no one's ever exploited it. What is that? Is that really a vulnerability?
Yeah.
What is that thing? It's certainly not what people typically think of as a vulnerability in that context. And so if we can make the assumption that there are a lot of vulnerabilities and we think it's well north of 99% of vulnerabilities are never going to get exploited, that's a pretty big indictment of how we've been talking about computer security up to this point.
Yeah. Going back to your point about the maths, I'm not sure if you've posted this meme yet, but there's a meme, the math isn't mathing.
Uh-huh.
So that's one for your next piece of content, maybe.
Yeah. We struggle with the memes too, because people will read it away and you kind of need them to read it another way. And I don't really want to lecture everyone with every single meme, but I do want to give them the foundation for thinking through this stuff. And I don't know, it's strangely effective. I've noticed a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes that I don't think would have happened otherwise. A lot of vendors are very nervous and coming out of the woodwork and talking to us because they want to see where we're going. A lot of VCs who found those same companies are coming out of the woodwork to come and talk to us on the promise that they pretty please won't tell anybody what we're up to, kind of thing. And what comes out of that conversation is we'll ask them very simple questions like, if these are the things that you are trying to do, which of the companies you've invested in are doing any one of those things? And the answer is none of them. And so, okay, well, then there's probably a problem there, isn't there? And there's probably a big opportunity to be had if you were invested in the right thing. And the unfortunate reality is they now realize they've made some very poor investment choices. And so I can't talk too much about our investment thesis of the fund, but well, I can talk about it to some extent. The SEC has some weird rules about that, so I probably shouldn't. Let's just pass on that one.
So moving on to obviously the podcast, Keep Austin Secure. The community we've been building in Austin has been pretty impressive. I've been really surprised actually around just how many security leaders there are here. And we were speaking about this earlier.
Oh yeah.
There's a couple, yeah. How long have you been in Austin?
16, I think, 17, something like that years.
So you moved here before it was cool?
Downtown doesn't look anything like it used to.
Really?
Rainy Street used to be a bunch of small buildings. Now it's high rises. The food here was terrible when I moved here. Awful. And now it's great.
Yeah.
It's like world class. I think it's changed a ton. Yeah.
What brought you here in the first place?
Well, my business partner had family in San Antonio, so he wanted to move to Texas anyway. And I was on the advisory board of a company called Click Forensics, which eventually got bought by Google. And they had office space, and they said, why don't you just move here? We want you around anyway, so just move here and we'll give you free office space. And so I did that for about a year. And we're, less state taxes. So I was trying to, make things a little cheaper for running the company. This is when we were starting the consultancy. And some of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life were here. Like truly, truly amazingly nice people. And not that I was driven by niceness, especially back then, but like to the point where I thought people were trying to steal my wallet, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I was in New York, I'd be like, "Hey, dude, like, is this going to come to blows? Like, what's going on? Why are you this nice?"
Coming from London, I had exactly that same feeling. I'll be in the elevator and someone would compliment me. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's this guy? Well, what's his game?
Yeah.
I had an experience the day I landed, the following day, I was jet lagged. It's like 7 a.m. I was walking around Sunday morning trying to find a coffee shop. My phone, where I was from the UK here, the data hadn't switched over. And I asked somebody, like, "You've got a coffee? Where did you get that coffee from?" He's like, "Oh, I'll show you." It's like, this is weird. And he walked me one block around and he took me to Joe's Coffee downtown. And I thought he was just the nicest guy I've ever met, nicest guy I'll ever meet. And just stuff like that happens here all the time. Even the people that aren't from here, I feel like I'm definitely nicer since I've lived here. You definitely are, as you said earlier.
Yeah,
it definitely brings out the best in people, I think, being here.
I don't know if it's the city that did that to me, but it certainly has enabled me to meet a lot more people like me.
Yeah.
And not like, security wise. I mean, just nice people. Yeah, I had a similar experience when I was in the middle, pretty late at night, and I wanted a pizza. I was at a buddy's house, and he was throwing a party, and we're all hungry. So I called, and the first like 2 or 3 pizza places didn't pick up, and the fourth or whatever picked up. I'm like, "Hi, are you guys open?" He's like, "No," and I could hear he's about to hang up the phone, and I'm like, "Oh, excuse me," and he's like, "Oh, sorry, were you about to say something?" And I'm like, it was such a weird reaction. I'm like, yeah, I was just wondering, is there any other pizza places? He's like, "Hold on a second." And he's like, he pulls out like the yellow pages or whatever. He's like, he goes, he's flipping, gets to the pizza place. He's like, "No, they're closed. They're closed." Yeah, this place is they're technically open. They're going to pretend like they're closed, but just, tell them like, "Come on, bro," whatever. I'm like, he sat on the phone with me for like, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 minutes going through pizza places. I'm like, what is happening here? That would never happen back in California. Like never.
That's so cool. Did you get the pizza?
No, I didn't. He didn't pick up the phone, but it didn't matter. I was just so impressed with how nice this guy was. Like, so weird.
Yeah. Even we've spoke about building like another community as we grow into different regions.
Mm-hmm.
Or like we probably won't get the same traction as we did in Austin. Like everybody here just wants to meet, want to spend time together. Yeah, want to. I think there's happy hours.
I think there's other really like genuinely nice places, but there's something about, I don't know, a mix of the culture and the landscape. A lot of people think Texas is flat. It's like really hilly here and rivers going through the city and green, and it looks very different than I think people think it looks.
I was surprised.
And, skyscrapers and, it's a city. It's a metropolitan city with running trails, and it's beautiful, right? Really awesome place. Lot to do and bar scenes and, nightlife, and there's something going on in the security world nearly every day. So if you are interested in security, like this is an incredibly dense culture of very intelligent and thoughtful and caring people. Like I didn't really get into the community aspect of the security industry when I first got here. I was politely and I was delighted by the fact that they came out of the woodwork to greet me, but I still didn't feel like I was part of it, if that makes sense. That was on me, not on them. Again, I think it was coming from a different place and having a very different outlook on life. But now I've actually started like really letting myself kind of get involved and talk to more people. And it's really nothing to do with the fund. It's actually just nice to like have friendlies who kind of know where we're coming from and can share similar things that are happening in their line of work or whatever. Like I'm learning a lot about how just business works by hearing other business people complaining about, like, should I fire this guy for these reasons? Or, like I'm running into this weird contract dispute. Have you guys ever run into this? Or this vendor is acting this weird way. Have you guys seen this? Anybody have better contacts here or whatever? So I'm learning a lot about just how the industry works just by having a lot of peers. And it's just, I don't know, it's been wonderful. Like, and we actually do things together. Like, and I think a week from now, we're going to go hang out and go see Ryan Holiday speak.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's clearly not a security thing, but a whole bunch of guys who self-proclaim themselves as stoics want to go hang out and listen to a guy talk about stoicism. Okay, I guess we're going. And so there we are.
That's really, is that in Austin?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I know we were talking about Chris Williamson earlier. She's here in November.
Yeah.
I'll check that out. If for somebody that's just moved here, me or another security exec that's moved here, is there any particular communities that you would suggest?
Well, it certainly depends on your interests, because there are quite a few different kind of little enclaves of people. Like there's the ISSA groups, mostly business. OWASP is mostly web app. You have AHA, which I think is more on the offensive network side. And I mean, it really just throw a rock. You're going to find somebody who's doing something you're interested in. There's also like Linux user groups, and a lot of the nerds are really into like things like ham radios, and a lot of people these days are getting into LoRaWAN, which is sort of text messaging, encrypted text messaging, long range text messaging on a different band or whatever. So you'll find like in those like radio groups, there'll be a whole bunch of security guys, and it's very we're everywhere in the city.
Yeah.
And so I would say just get to know guys like Stefan Chenette, for instance. Wonderful if you don't already know him.
Yep.
Really
Played
great.
pickleball with him a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He knows he's kind of new to Austin, but he's one of those guys who just like, screw it, I'm going to meet every single security person I possibly can in Austin, and he did. I don't know how he did it. He knew more people than I did within a year.
When he came to pickleball, he had a lunch straight after, and then a dinner in the evening of that day.
Mhm.
I think there was an InfoSec leaders one, and then a business owners in Austin one like, straight after.
Right.
The guy's very well networked.
Yeah, and it happened all within a year, and I was very impressed by how he did that. But if you know Stefan Chenette, you're 1 degree of separation from basically every security guy in Austin.
Really?
And so he's a great. And then HD Moore is another really good one. If you can, he's really nice about meeting with new founders and entrepreneurs, especially. But really anybody who's in security, who's looking for a job or looking to do something interesting, he's a great guy. I hate to say myself, but I know quite a few people as well. Trey Ford knows a lot of people. There's a bunch of us, and we're all really easy to like. Once you're kind of not a weirdo, you're in, and then that's pretty much all it is. And I don't mean you can be a little weird, like everyone's a little weird, but I mean, you know what I mean. Just you know what I mean.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Was there anything I should have asked that I didn't ask?
I don't know. I don't know where we are in time, but I think we did a good job. I'd say next steps for me, if anyone wants to help out with root evidence, because I think this is going to take a community. It's not something we can do on our own. Reach out to me or Jeremiah and say I want to join the design partner program, because we're going to need an army of people that are clear-headed and really ready to move into the new age of computer security. And it's not one of those things that I take lightly. I really am very, very serious about this. It's beyond passion. It's like it might be the thing I do, even though I've done things that they're literally running on your computer right now and have saved
so
1 billion
crazy.
people. Even though I've done stuff like that, I think this might be the capstone. This might be the most important thing we do because so much depends on certain things not getting compromised, and not getting compromised that lead to loss. That if you don't get this one thing right, I don't know what we've done as an industry. And if I'm going to have spent the bulk of my life and not made really any progress on the core thing that we're all worried about, that's going to weigh on me. And so I take it extremely seriously. I know Jeremiah does as well. We talk about all day long, but we need help. We need partners, people who want to, they want to get into it. They don't understand what we're doing. They would like to know more. They have a VM program they're not particularly happy with. They're getting hacked anyway. People who are in the insurance world who want to talk about how cyber insurance impacts it, or MSSPs who want to sell it, or banks that want to protect their clientele, like anyone. I don't care where you're coming from. DFIR companies, we're finding who are compromised. We have data. Anybody who's doing anything interesting in this space, I want to talk to them. Because we're going to need a lot of friends. And part of that friendship is, building up a better understanding of the landscape. And part of it is, frankly, I'm sure we're going to make mistakes if we don't have a lot of eyes on what we're doing. And that's why we're kind of building in public. We're like, we're showing people our work as we go. I mean, granted, they're getting a delayed response, but we are definitely going to build this thing in as loudly and as publicly as possible. So there aren't any big question marks about why we're doing things. We're not going to get it right. No one can get it right out of the gate, but with enough help from the community, I think this is directionally the biggest change that we can make as an industry.
Yeah. On the design partner front, is there like a website or an application form, or just reach out to you on LinkedIn?
I think by the time this airs, there will be such a thing. But you can also just reach out to me or Jared directly, and we can get you in the list. Or Greg Reber is another guy on our team. He's been in security forever. But yeah, we're just looking for anybody who's passionate about this problem. And actually, Jared put out this thing called the Security Optimist. I don't know if you guys talked about that or not, but it's basically like there's this way that we've been acting as an industry that like gloom and doom, it only takes one vulnerability to get compromised, and like you're going to get compromised and all these things, and it's like it's all this gloom and doom, and it doesn't actually have to be that way. We just have to know and beat our enemy, and that is a doable thing. It's just that no one has really made a concerted effort to actually understand how to do it.
Yeah.
We keep talking around the edges and like attribution and like here's some indicators of compromise, or we did this trend analysis on a thing. Like, have you actually gone and talked to these guys? Like, have you actually figured out what they're doing? Have you actually looked at the tools they're using? And they post all the time. They talk about what they're doing, and we have tons of evidence of what actually happened after postmortem. Like, let's go like actually analyze all this data. And yeah, we're learning a lot. And I think, which is strange to say, I know we're way ahead of everybody, but we're also way behind the adversaries. Like, they know more than we do because they're sentient, because these are really intelligent people who make money off this, and they've got a lot of ideas and designs and thinking and contingency plans and stuff. And so we're decades behind where they are. Decades as an industry. They're hitting us with stuff that's been working for decades, and the best we have is find another 100,000 CVEs in the last 2 years. That's the best we have to offer, and it's like there's more to be done.
Yeah, no, I love how passionate you are about it.
Yeah.
Even speaking about it, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great speaking to you, Robert. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, pleasure.
And I'll include your LinkedIn, and if we have the advisory link, the partner link,
yeah,
I'll put that in the show notes
Great.
as well.
Sounds good.
So if people want to sign up. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.